Hello everyone, a very good morning and welcome to Unacademy, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. So let's begin with the analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper by first looking at the topics that we are going to discuss today. From the Delhi edition of The Hindu, I have chosen 6 important articles for a detailed discussion. There are 3 articles that require a comprehensive analysis and few smaller articles that are more relevant for your prelims exam. So let's cover these topics one by one. Let's ensure it's a comprehensive discussion so that you don't have to go back and read the newspaper again. If you're benefiting from the initiative, do support us by pressing the like button, share your comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. So let's begin with the first article from page number 8. On this page, we have a very important column that examines the pros and cons of holding simultaneous elections in the country. This topic has been in the news over the last few years, especially since Prime Minister Modi himself has prioritized this as a top agenda for the current government. In fact, since 2014, PM Modi has been pushing for one nation, one election. The ruling BJP at the center has made it an electoral priority as well, to push for simultaneous conduct of elections in the country. There have been various commissions that have dealt with the issue. There are some important recommendations by these commissions as well. And even the Election Commission of India has said that it is viable to hold simultaneous elections while there are concerns that need to be addressed. So this is the topic that the writer of the column is examining. The writer is presenting both sides of the argument. He's highlighting the pros associated with holding of simultaneous elections and the downside of it, and what could be a way forward to introduce simultaneous elections. So let's understand this topic in complete detail. Last year, the government of India has established a high-level committee under the chairmanship of former President Ramnath Kovind to look into this issue. This high-level committee is consulting with all the stakeholders, including the Law Commission, the Election Commission of India, and all the political parties, to come out with a set of recommendations that might pave the way for the introduction of simultaneous elections. So now the question is, what do you mean by simultaneous elections? Simultaneous elections essentially refers to the holding of parallel elections to the Lok Sabha and the state legislative assemblies. This essentially is referred to as simultaneous elections, the conduct of parallel elections to the Lok Sabha and the state legislatures. See, there was a time when these elections were being held at the same time. Immediately after India's independence, in the first few general elections, there were parallel elections held to the state assemblies as well, because their terms coincided. But over a period of time, there has been a mismatch that has emerged between the time period of the legislative assemblies and the Lok Sabha. So this led to a mismatch between the elections at the national level and the state level. And we see that every year there are multiple elections happening in the country. So because of this, there are many issues that come up, many governance-related issues, administrative issues, social issues as well, and even the cost of running frequent elections. These are the major concerns that come up when the country is constantly in election mode. Now let's look at the background first. Let us see the period when India was holding simultaneous elections, why it got disrupted, and what is the rationale behind the call for bringing back simultaneous elections in the country. If you look at the first 4 general election cycles, starting from 1951-52 till 1967, more or less simultaneous elections were held in the country, especially in the first 2 general elections in 1952 and 1957. These were simultaneous elections where parallel elections were held to the Lok Sabha and the state legislatures. But this cycle was broken for the first time in Kerala. In 1959, the then communist government was dismissed by the ruling Congress, following which elections were held for the State Assembly of Kerala in 1960. So this disrupted the pattern, the simultaneous pattern of holding elections to the Lok Sabha and the state assemblies. But Post 1967, after defections became the norm, where legislators would jump from one party to another, it would lead to frequent toppling of state governments. There were few coalition governments at the center as well, which collapsed before the expiry of their 5-year term. Then President's rule under Article 356 was allegedly misused by ruling parties at the center to target opposition-ruled states, to topple state governments. So because of these frequent disruptions, a complete mismatch came up between the election calendar for the Lok Sabha and the election calendar for the state assemblies. Today, there are only 4 states in India whose elections coincide with general elections. Is that clear? This is Andhra Pradesh, Odisha, Arunachal Pradesh and Sikkim. These are the only 4 legislative assemblies whose election calendar exactly coincides with the general elections held to the Lok Sabha. Other than that, for every other state, the elections are completely out of sync with the general elections. So because of this, the country is always in election mode. Every year there are few state elections being held, at least 2 to 3. And in some years there are 4, 5 or 6 states which go towards elections. So the frequent conduct of elections at the state level and finally at the national level puts the country into election mode, and this has certain disadvantages. So that is why various commissions, the Law Commission of India back in 1999 and even the Election Commission of India back in 1983, they had supported the idea of bringing back simultaneous elections. Now this is being popularly referred to as one nation, one election, which has been made a political priority by the current ruling BJP dispensation at the center. If you look at the Law Commission report of 1999, which was headed by Justice B.P. Jeevan Reddy, this Law Commission report strongly advocated the reintroduction of simultaneous elections. Then recently we had a parliamentary standing committee of the which looks at Ministry of Law and Justice. This parliamentary standing committee in 2015 also supported the introduction of simultaneous elections, but with certain checks and balances. Politically as well, at the political level, there have been consultations between major parties trying to push for the introduction of simultaneous elections in India. Back in 2003, under the Vajpayee administration, a consultation had taken place between Prime Minister Vajpayee and then opposition leader Sonia Gandhi. More recently, under Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, opposition leader L.K. Advani held consultations, and there was a degree of consensus at the highest political levels to push for simultaneous elections. But however, these reforms have not been introduced because this would require a number of constitutional amendments. It would require a number of amendments to important laws and rules. And more importantly, the current term of several state assemblies will have to be cut short. And the term of certain state assemblies may have to be extended in order to match the election calendar, in order to bring the election calendar in sync with the general elections. See, the advocates of simultaneous elections, they point out that there are many advantages to introducing one nation, one election. The proponents, they argue that the biggest advantage is the reduced cost in the conduct of elections. According to latest data from the Election Commission, 4,000 crores was spent on the last general election. This is the cost incurred on the state exchequer to hold general elections, which is for the Lok Sabha. Now, add to this the cost of conducting elections to state assemblies. Every year, there are a few state assembly elections going on. Now, this accounts only for the expenditure incurred through the Election Commission of India to arrange the logistics to carry out the elections, to deploy the security personnel, to move around the EVMs, to carry out awareness campaigns, right? So the cost involved is around 4,000 crores plus the cost involved for state assembly elections, and more importantly, the cost incurred by the political parties and the politicians. This cost would be many, many times higher than the cost incurred by the Election Commission in holding the elections. So the cost can be significantly reduced if the elections are brought in sync at the national and state level. So this is one important logic and rationale behind pushing for simultaneous elections in India. This is, of course, a very valid argument. The reduction in cost will reduce the expenditure from the state exchequer. But the other important advantage is with regard to governance. It's argued by legal experts and by political scientists that governance in India is often crippled because our politicians, our leaders are constantly in campaign mode. They're constantly in election mode. Since every few months, elections are being held to some state or the other, then finally the general elections kicks in after the 5-year term. Our top leaders at the state and national level, our political parties, both national and regional parties, they are permanently in campaign mode, meaning they are always interested in coming out with populist schemes, populist policies to influence the voters in the electorate. So this could affect policy making. It could affect governance. And also don't forget, whenever elections are announced, the model code of conduct, which is brought out by the Election Commission of India, kicks into effect. This restricts the launch and implementation of several policy and welfare schemes. So this affects governance in the country. If every few months there are elections being held in some part of the country, it brings some restrictions on the central government and the concerned state governments, and it cripples governance and decision making because the politicians and the parties will be constantly in election mode, focusing more on populist schemes, and even implementation of genuine schemes and delivery of services could get crippled because of the restrictions implemented or restrictions brought out by the model code of conduct. This is again a very valid argument. Then similarly, on the administrative front, there are implications as well. If the country is constantly in election mode, then the government machinery, the bureaucracy, is also preoccupied with elections. Because the Election Commission of India primarily relies on the administrative machinery for the manpower required to conduct elections in the country. So if the government officials at the national, state and local level, if they are always preoccupied with elections, then that is a waste of manpower. This is a drain on the administrative efficiency, and it affects the implementation of government schemes and welfare programs, and it brings down administrative efficiency. And if constant elections are being held, security forces have to be deployed, they have to be moved around constantly. So for securing the elections, we make use of not just the police forces at the state level, but even the Central Armed Police Forces under the Home Ministry. BSF, CRPF and other Central Armed Police Forces are deployed by the Election Commission to secure the elections, to ensure that there is free and fair conduct of elections, to prevent violence and any untoward incident. So this could affect the security of the nation as well, because these forces have a different mandate. They have dedicated responsibilities. Some of them are border guarding forces. Some are involved in internal security of the country. So security of the nation could also be compromised if the country is in constant election mode, because it will drain the resources of our paramilitary forces and the police forces. So overall, administration could suffer when the country is in constant election mode. And finally, social cohesion, social unity could be affected, because most of our politicians and political parties, they try to garner votes on the lines of religion, caste, etc. They try to polarize the society for votes. And if the country is constantly in election mode, this will keep happening again and again. And now with social media, the influence of such polarization campaigns is much more deeper. It's much more widespread, and this could hit the social unity in the country. The social cohesion could be permanently affected. As parties and politicians, they seek votes on the lines of language, religion, caste, etc. These divides will widen in the society, and this could affect the stability of the society and the nation itself. So these are very valid arguments in favor of simultaneous elections. This makes a strong case for introducing simultaneous elections in the country. But however, the issue is not so simple. There are some challenges. There are some genuine concerns. The biggest concern is with regard to federalism. I hope you know that federalism is a part of the basic structure of the Constitution. India is a federal polity. Under the federalist principle, the center has its own jurisdiction. The states have their own jurisdiction. The subjects are divided into the union list, the state list, and the concurrent list under the 7th schedule of the Constitution of India. So the center and states have different spheres of their own jurisdiction. But this could be adversely affected. The federal nature, the center-state relations could be adversely affected if simultaneous elections are introduced without putting much thought into it. Because see, when the union and states, when they have their own set of responsibilities, there is a possibility that if simultaneous elections are introduced, national issues might overtake or overshadow state-specific local issues. General elections have to be fought on the lines of national issues, and state elections have to be generally fought on the lines of state-related or state-level issues. But the merger of the two could lead to overshadowing of the local issues by the bigger national issues. Let me give you an example. Let's say simultaneous elections have been introduced. Assume that, hypothetically, simultaneous elections are introduced, and issues like India's foreign policy, issues like India's defense preparedness, these issues which capture popular imagination, they will become a priority for the voters, and they might forget the basic issues like education, land-related issues, water, basic governance-related issues. So the bigger national issues, the national agenda can easily overshadow and overtake the local state-related issues and the grassroots governance-related issues. So this could be bad news for state-level governance. This could give an advantage to large national-level parties. It could even lead to a monopoly of a certain party, or it could lead to a decline in the influence of regional parties. As national issues become more important, and if simultaneous elections are fought largely on the lines of national issues and national agenda, regional parties at the state level, the sub-regional parties, they might lose their prominence and significance. If voters start voting on these lines, on the lines of national issues instead of state-related local issues, it could lead to the decline of regional parties and sub-regional parties, and this could weaken democracy itself, and it could weaken the core principle of federalism. Right? It could lead to a situation where there is a duopoly or a monopoly between two parties, or maybe just the domination of one single party at the national level, with complete subjugation of the regional state level parties. So this could undermine the interests of the state. It could go against the very basic structure of the Constitution, as it could weaken federalism and erase the concept of federalism. Then even with regard to policy making, there could be a negative impact, because elections are a feedback mechanism for the government, for the elected leaders. Through elections, voters have the right to throw out governments which don't perform well. But if simultaneous elections become the norm, and if elections are held only once in 5 years, for 5 years there is no feedback to the elected leaders. So this may not lead to better policy making. It may lead to complacency. If the term is guaranteed for the Lok Sabha and the legislative assemblies, the elected leaders may not have the right incentive to innovate in policy making, to come out with better policies, because there is no feedback, there is no pressure on them until the next round of elections comes up, which is once in 5 years. So this could adversely affect policy making due to the lack of regular feedback. Right now, parties and the elected leaders, they are more proactive because they know that every year they have to go out and seek votes, as there are elections being held in some state or the other. Now imagine the Prime Minister or the Union Cabinet Ministers. They are mindful of the fact that there are elections being held every year in different states. If our party has to win votes, we have to ensure that we deliver. We deliver better governance. We come out with better policies. So there is a constant feedback that exists, a constant motivation and a pressure that exists on the ruling party to deliver better policies and governance. If this is taken away, if the term is guaranteed, and if there is no feedback, there is no motivation for the elected leaders to concentrate on policy making and to deliver better governance. So policy making could suffer. Then finally, there is a big challenge. Even if we accept in principle that simultaneous elections are needed, we carry out a cost-benefit analysis. right? We compare the pros and cons, and finally, we arrive at a conclusion that simultaneous elections are still needed. But even after agreeing in principle, how do we implement it? Because the implementation will require a number of changes, including some major constitutional amendments, especially Article 83, 85 and 172, 174 that deal with the term of the Lok Sabha and the State Assembly and the dissolution of these houses. This has to be amended. Article 356, which deals with President's rule, will have to be amended. Then the required laws such as RPA, Representation of the People Act 1951, will have to be amended. The concerned rules of the houses, the rules of procedure of Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha and the state assemblies, they will have to be modified. Then more importantly, what about the no confidence motion? See, in the current setup, right, there are different ways through which the government can fall and the houses are dissolved. For example, let's say there is no majority in the house. Let's say there was a state government, but it loses majority due to defection of certain members. The house loses confidence in the executive. That would lead to the fall of the government. Let's say the opposition brings a no confidence motion, challenging the confidence in the executive, right? And if the government can't prove its majority on the floor of the house, and if the no confidence motion passes through, that would lead to the collapse of the government and the dissolution of the house, right? So there are many ways in which existing assemblies or legislatures could be dissolved. Of course, Article 356, right, where President's rule would be imposed. So these are the current provisions that exist. So what will happen to them? What kind of changes should be brought about here? What will happen to no confidence motion? If we introduce simultaneous elections, no confidence motion cannot exist in the current form, because if it passes through and it leads to the collapse of the government, then the house cannot be dissolved. It will bring back the same old problem. It will again create a mismatch between the election cycle of the central government and the state governments. So these are the key issues, constitutional, legal issues, statutory issues that needs to be addressed. Now, if you look at the latest recommendations of the Law Commission, which was brought out in 2018, a few solutions have been suggested. The Law Commission of India said that instead of merging all the elections together and holding it once in 5 years, it has recommended that we can hold elections in 2 cycles. Let's say, for example, in 2024, we are headed towards Lok Sabha elections by May 2024. So along with the general election, maybe for half the states in the country, parallel elections can be held. So this is one cycle. Then 2.5 years later, the remaining half states, the remaining 50% of the states, for them elections can be held. So that there are only 2 election cycles in a span of 5 years. This is what Law Commission of India suggested in 2018. But either ways, it will require the extension of the term of certain existing state assemblies, because some of them will lapse before the elections. And in some cases, the term of the assemblies has to be curbed, it has to be curtailed, meaning elected assemblies and governments at the state level have to be removed to pave the way for introduction of simultaneous elections. Now take the example of Karnataka. Recently elections were held in Karnataka and there is a Congress government. So they have at least around 4 years of term left, but the assembly and the state government will have to be brought down in order to hold simultaneous elections in Karnataka. So that is the question. Can this be done? If this has to be done, constitutional amendments have to be carried out, right? Then, as I mentioned, what about the no confidence motion? It can't remain in the existing form. So the Law Commission had recommended that no confidence motion can be introduced on the floor of the House only if it is mandatorily accompanied by a confidence motion for the formation of an alternative government. Only if the other elected members can prove majority and stake the claim to form a government, and if they can go ahead and form an alternate government, only then it should be allowed. So that even if the current executive is pushed out, the House is not dissolved. From the existing House itself, an alternate government is formed, which doesn't affect the stability of the assembly and it doesn't disturb the election cycle, which is brought in sync with the general elections. So that is a suggestion given by the Law Commission. It has also talked about pushing by-elections, clubbing all the by-elections together and holding them once a year. By-elections are often held when there is a death of a elected legislator, or when a legislator has resigned, or when they have been disqualified on certain grounds provided in the constitution. So these MLA MP seats would have fallen vacant. So instead of holding these by-elections every now and then, they can all be clubbed together, and at the end of the year, together these by-elections can be held. So these are some practical suggestions that the Law Commission had provided in 2018. But please look at this chart. This actually gives you an insight into the changes that will have to be done at the state level. The table here is telling you by how many months the term of state legislative assemblies has to be curtailed or extended in order to synchronize the elections. For majority of the states, the term will have to be curbed, like Karnataka. The Karnataka Assembly still has 47 months left. This will have to be curtailed. Let's say Uttarakhand, the term will have to be curtailed by 33 months. West Bengal, the term will have to be curtailed by 23 months. Right? So this is a challenge. Only 4 states are in sync with general elections where no changes are needed. That is Andhra Pradesh, Odisha, then Sikkim and Arunachal Pradesh. But there are few states where the term will have to be extended by few months in order to synchronize the state and national elections. In states like Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, Telangana, etc. So this remains the challenge. Now, if this issue is so controversial and so debatable in India, then what is the global context? Are there any other democracies in the world? Are there any parliamentary democracies in the world where simultaneous elections are introduced? Let's take a look at this. There are few parliamentary democracies like South Africa, Sweden and Germany. These 3 parliamentary democracies, they have a version of simultaneous elections. They do hold parallel elections at the state and provincial level. And when it comes to the election of the president, right, they have a different process where they are often elected by the members of the National Assembly itself. So these 3 countries, they have introduced simultaneous elections. There are few more which have a different version of simultaneous parallel elections. So of course, there are many pros, many advantages. There are few drawbacks. So now it is left to the high-level committee headed by former President Ramnath Kovind. And this committee will submit a report maybe very soon. And we have to see how the government will take it forward. So the writer of the column is suggesting that the best way forward is to find an ideal middle ground. See, right now, the concern is about merging national elections with state elections. Why? Because the biggest fear is that the jurisdiction of the states will get compromised. Federalism will get compromised. Democratic constitutional principles could get compromised as national issues and national parties will get more prominence in case of simultaneous elections. So one way to address this, while taking the advantage of simultaneous election, is to ensure that all state elections are held together, whereas general elections are held separately. This is a great suggestion. How about holding Lok Sabha elections? Let's say in 2024, Lok Sabha elections will be held, but no state election will be held for the next 2.5 years. Only in that second cycle, all state assembly elections will be curbed. All the state assemblies will be brought in sync through the required constitutional amendments and amendments to RPA. Some of the assemblies will be terminated early before their term expires. For some of the assemblies, the term will be extended. So all state assemblies are in sync, and we will hold simultaneous elections for all the states 2.5 years later. And this cycle will keep going on. So this ensures that we get the advantages of simultaneous elections, which is reduced cost, improvement in governance, ensuring that our parties are not always in election mode, improving administration because it frees the bureaucracy to focus on welfare, ensuring that social cohesion is maintained, right? It prevents frequent campaigns through which our politicians are polarizing our society. So elections will happen only twice in 5 years. Once for general elections and 2.5 years later, all state elections together. This at the same time protects the constitutional principles, the democratic federal principles, and protects the jurisdiction of the states, ensures that national parties will not overshadow regional parties. So this is the suggestion being offered by the writer of the column, and I think it's a worthy point to be considered. So you can definitely expect mains questions based on this, or maybe even a essay topic. It's a potential essay topic. So let's move on to the next article. From page number 9, we have an important article that talks about battery technology. Battery technology in the EV industry, in the electric vehicles industry. I'm sure all of you know that India and most countries, they are looking to make a major transition to move away from internal combustion engines and adopt electric vehicles that are primarily powered by batteries, especially lithium-ion batteries. Because battery-powered electric vehicles have many advantages. They offer many advantages. First of all, it will bring down your emissions and pollution levels. Right? Current petrol, diesel vehicles, if they are phased out, and if we completely transition towards EVs, the pollution levels will drop, greenhouse gas emissions will go down, thus helping us combat air pollution and as well as global warming and climate change. This will lay a path for more sustainable and a green economy, right? And it will bring many more advantages to the economy as well, especially for countries like India, which are heavily import dependent when it comes to fossil fuels. We can reduce our import dependency, which has geopolitical advantages as well. We can bring down our import bill, which could boost our economy. So many countries are considering a transition towards electric vehicles, and India is one amongst them. India has a clear roadmap throughout this decade through which we are pushing for the adoption of electric vehicles. We have the National Mobility Mission Plan, under which EV vehicle adoption is being pushed. So this requires transformative changes in the automobile industry and the policies of the country as well. It requires a creation of an EV ecosystem focused not just on the development of the automobiles, but especially on the battery technology that is needed. Because the batteries are at the very heart of electric vehicle, right? But in India, the ecosystem has been getting a lot of support, a strong support from the government of India, and even the charging infrastructure which is needed to charge your electric vehicles. Not just cars, but even your bikes and even the public transportation, the buses, right? We are seeing the transition happening and charging infrastructure being created around the country. So because of the positive encouragement, the proactive support from the government, we have seen a significant jump in the adoption of electric vehicles. Data from last year shows that EV sales has jumped by almost 50%. EV sales has almost jumped by 50%. We notice that EV sales have gone up, and the industry data shows that India is poised for significant growth in the coming decade. It could become a $100 billion industry by the end of the decade. So now, given this significance of electric vehicles and the lithium-ion batteries that power them, it's important to understand how do these lithium-ion batteries function? How do the lithium-ion batteries function? How is it designed? How is it structured? And what changes can be brought about to make them more efficient? Because I'm sure you would have heard that the main challenge with electric vehicles currently is that either there are challenges in charging them frequently. The charging time is much higher. Now, compared to your fossil fuel-based vehicles, you hardly take few minutes to refuel the vehicle to fill petrol or diesel. But in case of electric vehicles, the charge time is several hours. Sometimes you have to charge overnight. Next, it's about the mileage, the range of the vehicle. How many kilometers can you drive? Right? Even the speed and the overall capacity of the vehicle, the load it can bear. Right? These are major factors that affect the user experience. And also the cost, the economics of it. EV technology, especially lithium-ion battery technology, is very expensive as of now, given that several new age materials are being used in the development of EV vehicles and as well as in the development of the batteries. So right now, advances in battery technology has become a priority for the automotive industry and the energy industry. We need light, efficient batteries which can store more energy. We need such batteries which can provide us a longer range with regard to electric vehicles, which can charge quickly and with better safety features. I'm sure you would have seen many viral videos of electric bikes and cars catching fire in India. This has become common occurrence. So this raises safety concerns as well with regard to electric vehicles, as they are vulnerable for short circuits. So many vehicles have burnt, many people have lost their lives as well, which raises the question of safety as well. So this is what any customer would expect. We would want better prices. Right now, EV vehicles are very expensive, which makes it inaccessible, unaffordable for a large segment of the population. Next, it's about overall user experience in your day-to-day usage. What we need is better range, simplicity in charging, faster charging, and better safety, more fire retardant technologies. So this is what the users would expect. But given the role played by the lithium-ion batteries and the higher cost involved in their design and development, they are currently accounting for 40% of your vehicle cost. So no wonder EV vehicles are highly priced. They are priced at a much higher price point compared to your regular fossil fuel based conventional vehicles. So this is where you should understand the role of lithium-ion batteries in electric vehicles. Why are lithium-ion batteries preferred in the EV industry? What advantages do they provide? How is this battery structured and how does it function? Understanding this is crucial because there are many challenges present here. From an administrative governance perspective, this can be very relevant, because if the government has to encourage the industry and to provide, and if we have to provide for better batteries, if you have to design and develop more efficient and more reliable batteries, more safer batteries, understanding the structure and the functioning of the battery is very essential. You don't have to get very technical. At least understanding the basics could become important. Now, if you look at a lithium-ion battery and its structure, it basically comprises of two electrodes. You can see here in the image, you can see one lithium-ion cell depicted over here. There is an anode and a cathode which constitute the two electrodes, and there is a transfer of electrons between the two. It is this movement of electrons from the anode to cathode and cathode back to anode which we refer to as the charging and discharging cycle of the battery. There is an electrolyte through which the electrons pass through, which separates the anode and cathode. There is a barrier as well, a porous graphite. A porous graphite barrier is also used to separate the electrodes. So this is the basic constitution of your battery. There are two electrodes, an anode and a cathode, an electrolyte solution, and a graphite barrier. So in case of lithium-ion batteries, the lithium atoms in the anode, they give up electrons which move through the electrolyte and they travel to the cathode. This is the discharge cycle. This is what powers your vehicle. All right. And the reverse happens during the charging cycle. The electrons move from the cathode towards the anode, which we refer to as the charging cycle of the battery. So there are many such lithium-ion cells that are used to make up a battery pack which powers an electric vehicle, be it a car or a bike. To power them with electric energy, a battery of multiple lithium-ion cells, an entire pack of lithium-ion cells are used to generate the required current to power the engine. Is that clear? See, over here, lithium plays a very big role. Lithium is specifically preferred in the battery industry because it offers certain advantages. Today, lithium has become the white gold, right? It has become a very precious, strategic, critical mineral because its availability is first of all limited. It's present largely in few countries and few countries control the supply chain. But apart from that, the physical chemical properties of lithium has a lot to do with it being preferred in the battery industry. it is a material of choice for EV batteries in particular because it's one of the lightest solid elements that we know. This allows us to design batteries which are lightweight, which can store more energy as well. They have a high propensity to give up the electron more easily, thus inducing the current flow. So these physical chemical properties of lithium allows us to develop small batteries which are quite efficient. We can make smaller, lighter batteries that can store more energy, charge quickly, discharge more efficiently, right? So lithium-ion batteries have been the preferred choice in the battery industry for powering our EVs. But however, these batteries are not perfect. They are far from perfect. There are a lot of drawbacks, a lot of challenges associated with them. As I told you, one major concern is about the fire risk, the frequent short circuits. Since it's still a chemical composition which is used in the electrolyte, the leakage of the battery could cause a short circuit, triggering a fire, which increases the risk for the consumer, for the user. Its energy density, even though it is high, it is nowhere compared to your regular conventional vehicles powered by petrol and diesel. Is that clear? If you fuel your conventional vehicle with petrol and diesel, there is a guaranteed range for you, a guaranteed mileage. This is not the case with electric vehicles. Compared to before, today's batteries have made a huge jump, a quantum jump, but still the energy density is not enough and charging cycle takes a lot of time. The charging cycle takes many hours, which could affect user experience and it could affect the adoption of EVs. Now, can you sit and wait to charge an EV for hours together when you can just fill up your conventional vehicles with petrol or diesel in just few minutes? This is a big challenge. This is a problem statement to be solved by the battery industry and the automobile industry. Then the lifespan of the battery, given how expensive they are, right? If the lifespan is reduced, then this again becomes a challenge. The servicing cost, the maintenance cost will increase. And if the lithium-ion batteries remain as expensive as they are today, right, the cost of EVs will remain higher, which affects overall adoption of electric vehicles. So to solve all these challenges, we have to address the root problem, which is the overall efficiency and safety of these batteries. We need more advances in battery technology. That is the underlying point. And don't forget, there is a limited availability of lithium as a resource. It's considered as a strategic critical mineral with geopolitical implications. China largely controls the global supply chain of lithium. Few South American countries in the lithium triangle, Argentina, Bolivia, and others, they have few resources, and other countries like Australia, few African nations, and China, they have some limited reserves of lithium, thus making it a scarce, precious resource. India has found few lithium reserves, but we are still far away from commercially exploiting it. So there are concerns over its availability and its overall economic and geopolitical implications. Plus, the concern about large-scale mining. Because along with lithium, we will need other minerals as well, from nickel to cobalt to others, which is needed in the battery which is designed for EV vehicles. So the overall environmental risk also goes up, thus making it unsustainable as well in the long run. Electric vehicles may not be as clean and green as you think. They may not be contributing emissions, but maintaining this new supply chain and scaling up mining of these critical minerals could contribute to more environmental hazards and more emissions as well, thus negating its advantages. So this is where we need a paradigm shift in the battery industry. More research and development is needed. For example, first of all, we have to consider improving the structure of the battery itself, the chemical structure, the battery composition. This is what companies like Tesla have already pioneered. Tesla has come out with battery variants such as lithium iron phosphate and nickel manganese cobalt based batteries. These batteries are considered more efficient and more cleaner as compared to your regular lithium ion batteries. There's a structural change in the composition. The NMC batteries, nickel manganese cobalt batteries, they have higher energy density, which gives you more range, and they provide a reliable range for your vehicle. Then coming to the lithium iron phosphate batteries, the LFP batteries, which you find in the latest model of Tesla electric vehicles. They have a much better life, stability, and environmentally they are much friendlier. Also, the charging cycle is much faster. So such innovations are needed to change the very structure and the composition of the lithium ion battery. Along with that, we also need better battery management system. By deploying advanced sensors, by using better algorithms, we can better manage the battery during its charging and discharge cycle, which improves its efficiency, which can make it safer as well. For example, in the battery pack, there could be advanced sensors deployed, which can track temperature, which can track the voltage levels, and keep track of these key parameters. And if there is any fluctuation, there could be a smart algorithm, a computer system which can manage the battery better to increase its efficiency, its safety, and the overall range of these batteries and the lifespan of these batteries. These are much easier to deploy. You don't have to change the battery structure. The battery structure will remain the same. The traditional battery structures will remain. You just need a better management system to manage the flow of electrons, to keep track of the heating up of the battery, right? To moderate the overall functioning of the battery and the charging and discharging cycle. So this can be done quite easily with sensors and smart algorithms. And this is something which can improve the efficiency in the battery industry. So these are the changes which will have to be considered, and automobile industry is already working on it. There are other suggestions that can be considered. For example, solid state lithium batteries. They are the rage today. Solid state lithium batteries, please make a note, this can come as a prelims question. The traditional electrolyte, the chemical based liquid electrolyte which was there, which was responsible for leakages, fires, this is replaced in a solid state lithium battery with a solid state electrolyte. Because the liquid electrolytes are more flammable. They are more prone to catching fire. It's a fire hazard. This has been completely eliminated in the SSB lithium ion batteries because they are heat resistant. And also it's very lightweight. It's a solid electrolyte which is light in weight, doesn't add more weight to the battery because the weight of the battery is crucial in EV vehicles. And more importantly, it's heat resistant. It's largely fireproof. And also the graphite barrier, the graphite scaffolding which separated the two electrodes, the anode and the cathode, was inefficient. Now, if this is replaced by a solid state electrolyte, it acts as the scaffolding, the barrier between the anode and cathode, and it is proven to improve the efficiency of the battery when it comes to the movement of the electrons between the anode and cathode, right? There is a significant improvement seen in the efficiency of the battery in its charging and discharging cycle. So SSB batteries have become the standard today. It's a paradigm shift we are seeing in the battery industry. Though they are very expensive as of now, many companies are focusing on SSB batteries as they provide tremendous advantages. There is a significant improvement in the efficiency, the range, and the safety of these batteries compared to your traditional lithium-ion batteries. So these are the various changes that will have to be adopted by the battery and the automotive industry, and the government will have to actively support these changes if we have to transition towards electric vehicles. So without getting too technical, understanding the basics will be essential for a prelims question, and also as a future policy maker, you need to understand the challenges being faced by the industry. If there is an ambitious plan to make such a large-scale transition, obviously as an administrator, you should understand the challenges being faced at the industry level. These are the challenges and these are the ways through which it can be addressed. So you can expect science and technology questions or environment ecology questions related to this topic. Now coming to the third column, the third important article on the second page of the science and tech section in the online edition of the Hindu. You don't find this in the physical paper, but in the online edition of the e-paper, we have a science and technology section, and there on the second page, we have a very important, very interesting article related to geography and environment and ecology. The article is talking about Humboldt Enigma. What is Humboldt's Enigma? Again, possible prelims question or even a mains question. Humboldt, Alexander von Humboldt, was a German researcher back in the 1700s, 1800s. A very popular German researcher, a polymath. He was a naturalist. He was a geographer. He specialized in multiple research areas and domains. So we refer to such individuals as polymaths. So Alexander von Humboldt, right, was a polymath, and he contributed significantly to our understanding of geology and ecological evolution, etc. So based on his studies, which he conducted in South America, he proposed a theory that biodiversity that you see in a given ecosystem, he said that it is dependent on the temperature found in that particular ecosystem, the altitude of that particular place, and also the humidity levels. Based on his extensive research in South America, right, he carried out studies especially in Ecuador and Peru in the North Andes mountain ranges. He studied the distribution of biodiversity in this part of South America, and he came to a conclusion that these factors, these climatological, geological factors are directly influencing biodiversity. The temperature of the place, the altitude where the place is located, and humidity levels. They are playing a direct role in determining the kind of species that are present, the diversity of the species, both flora and fauna. This was the conclusion drawn by Alexander von Humboldt. Now, a team of researchers, right, they have come out with a related theory, which is being referred to as Humboldt's Enigma. To understand this, let's take a look at the distribution of productivity and biodiversity around the world. Then based on that, we'll have a discussion with regard to the points being referred to in the article. Now, according to Humboldt's theory, what did Humboldt say? Humboldt said that depending on the temperature, the altitude and humidity levels, the flora, fauna structure and the diversity changes from place to place. And also our general understanding is that in the tropical belt, that is between your Tropic of Cancer and Tropic of Capricorn, this is where we believe that productivity, primary productivity is at its highest. Now, what is primary productivity? Primary productivity is the productivity of the plants, right? This is a direct factor of the sunlight that is available and, of course, the nutrient levels that is available in a given region. Since the tropical area lying between the Tropic of Cancer and Tropic of Capricorn around the equator, this receives maximum solar insolation given the tilt and the axial inclination of the earth. This is where we generally see the highest primary productivity amongst plants and even with regard to the flora and the fauna as well. Essentially, across the food chain in the tropical belt, you find that productivity levels are very high, right? Plants, they take soil nutrients and sunlight through photosynthesis, they convert that into energy. So these energy levels produced in the tropical areas by the primary producers in the food chain is the highest compared to any other part of the world. When you compare this with the temperate areas, the polar areas, tropical belt registers the highest primary productivity amongst plants, and this continues through the food chain as well. This is the general assumption, the general understanding that we have. But however, there is a possibility for productivity to be higher outside of the tropics as well. And even within the tropical belt, there could be areas where productivity is lower, because this, according to the current research, is a factor of many geological and ecological factors. The location of the place, the altitude, the temperature, the climatological factors, the geological history of that land, they all influence the productivity of that ecosystem, which indirectly plays a role in influencing the biodiversity of that ecosystem. Biodiversity is nothing but the number of species found, the diversity of life found in a given ecosystem, right? The diversity of plants, animals, birds, etc. So this, according to Humboldt's Enigma, right, it's not just a feature of the tropical belt. Previously, Alexander von Humboldt had said that highest productivity is seen in tropical areas. It depends on temperature, altitude, and humidity. Usually, you find those factors in the tropical area. So the general assumption was this is where we find maximum biodiversity. This is true to an extent. Even if you look at the biodiversity distribution of the earth, right? The most biodiverse rich regions are found in the tropical area between Tropic of Cancer and Capricorn. This is true. But however, there are certain places within the tropical belt which have low productivity and low biodiversity. There are certain places outside of this belt in the temperate and polar areas as well where biodiversity can be higher, much higher than even the tropics. This is the enigma. Why is this happening? We generally find such higher biodiversity outside the tropics or even within the tropics in mountainous regions. If you have ever visited a mountainous area, if you have ever gone on a hike or a trek, right, you would see the diversity of life. Let's say you've gone on a trek in Uttarakhand or in Northeast India or in Western Ghats. Right? When you begin your journey, almost at the base, you come across a very different ecosystem. There's a very different distribution of plants and trees, and even the animal life, the bird life you find is very different. The moment you reach a certain altitude, within 1 or 2 hours, in a short distance, the profile entirely changes. Right? You come across a different set of plants and trees, maybe dense and taller trees, and you come across a different structure of flora. And each animal, bird, it occupies a different ecological niche, meaning they'll be performing different unique ecological roles in the overall food chain. Then as you reach closer to the summit, you might come across grasslands or open areas with less vegetation and a unique endemic species which is thriving at the top of the hill or at the top of the mountain. So have you ever wondered how can the ecological profile, the vegetation, the distribution of flora and the organisms, how can it change within such a short distance? Right? With just some changes in altitude, temperature, and other geological, climatological factors, you are witnessing a complete change in biodiversity. Right? This is because the factors that Alexander von Humboldt himself had highlighted, the geology of a place, the temperature, humidity, right? All these factors are playing a role, and you find this to be at the best in mountainous areas. See, this is where Alexander von Humboldt conducted his studies, especially in the northern Andes in Ecuador. He saw that the mountains had very rich biodiversity. Now, this is true in the case of the tropics as well. Now, within the tropical belt, right? India is a tropical nation. Within the tropical belt, if you look at Western Ghats, which is a mountainous area, has much better biodiversity than the Deccan Plateau. Correct? Similarly, outside of the tropics as well, there are possibilities where you find good biodiversity. Take the Himalayas. See, the Tropic of Cancer cuts through somewhere over here, through Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, etc. So this is our tropical belt. So there's no doubt that Western Ghats is biodiverse. It's one of the biodiversity hotspots, along with the Sri Lankan Central Highlands located over here. Right? This is one of the major biodiversity hotspots of the world. It's one of the 4 biodiversity hotspots spread around India. But outside the tropical belt, Himalayas is outside the tropical belt. The northeastern forests are outside the tropical belt. But here as well, you find great biodiversity. And in fact, according to studies, they are more biodiverse. They have a richer distribution of different flora and fauna species, even compared to the Western Ghats. If you compare the biodiversity of Western Ghats and the Eastern Himalayas still stands out. It has a much more diverse ecosystem, a much more diverse distribution of flora and fauna. And this has to do with the geology of the land, the history of that land, the climatology, the climatological features of that area. So temperature, altitude, right? Of course, the presence of nutrients. And don't forget, mountains, they would have gone through millions of years of transformation. They would have gone through uplifting process, right? The soil structure would have changed, nutrient availability would have changed. And the temperature plays a big role. So if you look at the distribution of the various animals, birds, plants and other species, the Himalayas, which is outside the tropics, displays richer biodiversity even as compared to Western Ghats, which is within the tropical belt. So this challenges our traditional understanding. The richer diversity found in mountainous areas outside the tropics, right, where it is even better than mountainous areas in the tropical belt, challenges our understanding, and this is called the Humboldt Enigma. To further study this, we need more data, more research, and that's exactly what the writers are indicating. We don't have conclusive answers. This is a theory, right? This is a theory which is validated by certain evidences, but we need more data, more evidence, more research to establish why this occurs. But the essence is very clear. You find richer biodiversity in mountainous areas around the world. Doesn't matter whether it's in the tropical belt or outside the tropical belt. Even outside the tropics, mountainous areas can display very rich biodiversity because of its geological, ecological evolution, right? And the climatological features, the temperature, the humidity levels, and of course the altitude plays a very big role in influencing the distribution of biodiversity. Now, if you trek in Western Ghats, at the bottom of the mountain you come across relatively dense vegetation. Somewhere in the middle you find long, tall trees and a very dense canopy, which almost creates a zone of darkness. But as you head towards the summit, you come across the Shola grasslands, open grasslands with endemic species thriving over there. So every few kilometers and with some change in altitude, you are seeing a complete change in the vegetation structure and in the biodiversity of the mountain. You find that in Himalayas as well, right? From dense vegetation, forested areas at the bottom towards snow-capped and harsh conditions towards the peak with unique endemic species thriving over there. You come across a very rich biodiversity in the Himalayas as well. And the researchers are pointing out that in eastern Himalayas and towards the Jammu and Kashmir, Uttarakhand stretch, you find better biodiversity than even the Western Ghats, which is in the tropical belt. So this is the enigma. This is the unanswered question. And the writers are saying we need further research to validate this theory and to explain why this abnormality is noticed. So now let's take a quick look at the prelims related articles. We have a few small articles in today's newspaper. On page number 10, there's an article referring to an attempt to hijack a commercial ship near the Gulf of Aden. Gulf of Aden is a strategic location. You can see the Horn of Africa over here. This is the narrow Bab el-Mandeb Strait that connects the Red Sea with Gulf of Aden. Now, traditionally, this part of the Indian Ocean, that is off the coast of Somalia and around Gulf of Aden, this is a pirate-infested water. The Somalian pirates, they frequently threaten commercial shipping. Now we have a new threat in the region, particularly in Red Sea and Arabian Sea, where a rebel group from Yemen called the Houthis have been targeting commercial ships. They have been firing missiles and drones, threatening commercial ships in the region. This is something we have discussed over the last few days. Recently, near the Gulf of Aden, just a couple of days ago, there was a fresh attempt reportedly by Somalian pirates to hijack an Iranian flagged oil vessel. But since Indian Navy is proactively deployed here to stabilize the region, an Indian naval ship, INS Sumitra, which was deployed, it has intervened and rescued the vessel from the hijackers, from the pirates. Indian Navy is constantly deployed here on an anti-piracy mission for many years, and now its mandate has gone up because of the threat posed by the Houthi rebels of Yemen. The frequent attacks, including few attacks against Indian ships headed towards India or Indian-owned ships, or ships which had an Indian crew, has raised the risk for India, and it threatens to destabilize the global economy as well. Because this is a vital shipping lane. The route that connects Mediterranean with Indian Ocean is via Suez Canal, Red Sea, Bab el-Mandeb Strait and Gulf of Aden. So the prevalence of Somalian piracy with the threat posed by the Houthi rebels increases the security risks for maritime trade, and this has serious economic and geopolitical implications. So Indian Navy is proactively deployed here. It's collaborating with other friendly navies as well. But we have this update that Indian Navy has foiled a hijack attempt by pirates near Gulf of Aden. Next, on the same page, we have an article referring to upcoming elections to Rajya Sabha. A few seats, around 56 Rajya Sabha seats, which are going to fall vacant, they will be filled through elections to be held on 27th of February. So it's important to understand the composition of Rajya Sabha and how elections are held to the Rajya Sabha. Basic facts are relevant for your prelims. Article 80 of the Indian Constitution provides for the composition of the Rajya Sabha. Currently, it has 245 members. 12 of them are nominated by the President of India. Those who have made enormous contribution, right? Eminent personalities from the field of art, literature, science, sports, etc. They are nominated by the President. 12 Rajya Sabha MPs are nominated. The rest are elected. But however, this is not direct election, meaning the voters will not elect Rajya Sabha MPs. The Rajya Sabha, essentially called the Council of States, represents the state at the national legislature, right? If Lok Sabha has direct elections, Rajya Sabha here has indirect elections. There is the proportional representation system which is used, and there are Rajya Sabha seats allocated to all the states, which gives the representation for the states within the parliament. And for those respective seats, the elections are held by the Election Commission of India. Election Commission of India conducts the election. So who are the electorate here? Who casts the vote? This vote is cast by the MLAs of the concerned state assembly. Through single transferable vote system, through a proportional representation system, the voting is carried out where the MLAs of the concerned state assembly, they will vote for the Rajya Sabha seats that have been allocated to that particular state. So the Council of States is representing the state in the parliament, right? So these Rajya Sabha MPs are elected by the respective MLAs from the state assembly. So this, however, is a permanent house. Unlike Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha is not dissolved. It's a permanent house. Each MP has a 6-year term. The provisions are clearly outlined in the RPA, the Representation of the People Act. And elections are held frequently. There are frequent elections held because 1/3 of the seats will fall vacant, and every 2 years Rajya Sabha elections are held. So each MP has a 6-year term, and 1/3 of them retire every 2 years. So every 2 years Rajya Sabha elections are held through proportional representation with single transferable vote system, where the MLAs of that respective state vote for the MPs to be elected into the Rajya Sabha. Next, the last article for today. On page number 12, we have an article which says that India's Foreign Secretary Vinay Quatra has visited Bhutan following the recent elections in Bhutan. The article is talking about several initiatives India has taken up to reach out to its neighborhood. We are focusing on improving our ties with Bhutan by promoting our ties with the newly elected government. We are doing the same with Bangladesh, which also went through elections. We're also reaching out to Pakistan as well. Our diplomatic ties are slightly improving because diplomatic visas have been issued by both India and Pakistan to each other's diplomats. So the article is mainly talking about the new initiatives India has taken to improve its ties in the neighborhood. The article itself is not relevant for us. There's nothing new over here. But there is one point which stands out. The article is referring to the Indian Ocean Conference. This could be important for your prelims. The Indian Ocean Conference is a track 1.5 diplomatic dialogue. It's a track 1.5 diplomatic dialogue that brings together not just diplomats and government representatives, but also strategic thinkers, experts, academicians, journalists from around the world to participate in this conference focused on the Indian Ocean. This conference was started back in 2016 and it was hosted for the first time by Singapore. So please make a note. It was hosted by Singapore in 2016 and now the 7th edition is being held in Australia. The 7th edition is being hosted by Australia at Perth. Now, this is relevant for the exam because this time India is also involved in the organizing of the conference. India is one of the host countries. The Ministry of External Affairs is working with a think tank called India Foundation. India Foundation is a leading foreign policy think tank working with the MEA, Ministry of External Affairs, and they have tied up with the government of Australia and another Australian think tank called the Perth US Asia Center. And also in Singapore, there is a very popular school for international studies, the S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies. So these are the entities involved in organizing the Indian Ocean Conference. So there are a few non-state actors like India Foundation, Perth US Asia Center, and the School of Strategic Studies in Singapore. These are non-state entities. These are think tanks and academic institutions. And along with them, there is government involvement. India's Ministry of External Affairs and the Australian government. So collectively, they will be organizing the 7th Indian Ocean Conference, which is a track 1.5 diplomatic dialogue. In diplomacy, when we say track 1 dialogue, it means state-to-state interaction, official state-to-state interaction between the diplomats of that respective country. When we say track 2 dialogue, right, it's a non-official interaction involving usually retired officers, retired diplomats and strategic experts, etc. Track 1.5 is a fusion of state and non-state elements where there are few diplomats and government representatives, plus there are non-state representatives from the media, from think tanks, and from the academia. So they will be involved in a track 1.5 dialogue. And Indian Ocean Conference, it is focusing on maritime security of the region. It's focusing on various issues affecting the Indian Ocean, and it's being organized by India along with Australia and other institutions. And this is in line with our Sagar doctrine, security and growth for all in the region. This is the motto that the Modi government has promoted towards the Indo-Pacific, right? And it's in line with India's objectives. So India is involved in organizing this year's Indian Ocean Conference. It will be held just in a few days in February. So please make a note of this. So this completes my detailed discussion of today's The Hindu newspaper. Please take up these questions for your answer writing practice. The first question, one nation, one election is an idea whose time has come. Critically examine its implications and suggest a way forward for its implementation. Examine the role of lithium-ion batteries in electric vehicles. What are the current drawbacks and how can it be addressed? These are very straightforward, relatively easy questions, and based on what we have discussed, you can easily write a structured answer, and I expect all of you to take up your answer writing practice by using these questions. With this, I would like to conclude today's discussion. I hope you guys have liked it. If you did, please let me know in the comments, press the like button, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. That is it for today. I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks for watching.